today's lecture in a very special place. You can see that there is a common thread of cinematic experiences in this lecture. Today we will have a presentation from a visiting doctoral researcher from the University, or Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, Canada, Saemi Jung. Saemi will be talking about her research and some of the methodological challenges associated with that research. You're going to talk about the structure, right?
Sure.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. So if you have questions, please raise your hand and let Saemi know, and then I'll go over to you.
Okay.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Saemi, and thank you so much for your kind introduction, Juliana. And it's been quite an amazing research day here in Graz for me. So my talk today, as you can see, the title suggests Visibility and Power, Research Across Technology and Society. And what I like to do today for the next 1.5 hours is, so last week with Dr. Dwelba, you talked a lot about surveillance as a concept within political theory. Today what I like to do with you is going empirical. You're going to do field work and how you conduct research and how you may shape your research questions in a way that you can do very human-centered, human-oriented research. So here is my agenda today. So the first is uncovering the invisible labor of many women Keypunch operators in the 1970s in the context of Canada. And this study draws on a history of early immigration policy in Canada, multiculturalism, gamified labor, but most importantly, it follows the tradition of the feminist science technology studies. And we will delve into the intersecting points of class, sex, and race. And secondly, we will look at the invisible space that is run by algorithms, which a lot of us are using every day, our social media platform. And basically, the second project is a larger consortium project where I'm working with a lot of different researchers from the fields of data science, humanities, as well as social sciences. And we will talk about this particular method called persona-based research in relation to vaccine hesitancy. And lastly, I will talk about my current research, my individual one, and it's a critical case study around what is known as the AI textbook. And I'm going to be talking about ethnographic method and approach and how that helps me do kind of work that I am very committed to, which is to examine the power and visibility. So we are going to time travel a little bit and go across the continents and moving across domains of history, public health, and social media, as well as education. But again, the unified theme here is how research methods can help us learn about tech and society in ways that we otherwise would not have been able to uncover. So the goal is methods, insights, and how we can make impact. Before I get into the details, this is something that I do every time I give a talk. I think it's incredibly important that I also reveal my positionality as a researcher to everybody. And it's an incredibly important exercise for everyone. So here I reveal to you that I'm a cisgender woman born and partially raised in South Korea. And I moved to the United States where I spent most of my childhood. In between, I was in Germany for a year as a DAD exchange student. Then I moved back to Korea to work as a financial journalist. So on the right, you see me reading Donald Trump's feed in 2016, talking about the Fed raising the interest rates. And then down below, I was interviewing Christine Lagarde, which was a very exciting point in my career. And then I decided to go back to the academia. So I moved to the UK in London to do my master's, and then I am now in the very western part of the North American coast, where I call home, where I call Canada my home. So given this context, my work is only naturally transnational. And how many of you are familiar with the term land acknowledgement? Okay. Yeah, so this is a practice that primarily associated in North America, Australia, and some parts of New Zealand. But I think some parts of Northern Europe are increasingly aware of land acknowledgements because of the Saemi people and their own indigenous populations. Within the province we know as British Columbia in Canada, there are about 198 First Nations, 30 languages with 60 dialects spoken, and these numbers don't include a lot of the Métis, Inuit people whose homes do not fall inside the province's borders. So what I want to acknowledge is that the institution that I work for and work at, Simon Fraser University, is indeed on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Squamish, Tsawasan, Semiahmoo, Kaikat, Katsi, and Musqueam. And obviously I'm not a settler there, I'm an uninvited guest. Very grateful to be able to live and work there and study. In other words, SFU is located on the unceded lands of many traditional First Nations. And so I'm a doctoral researcher at the Digital Democracies Institute within the Simon Fraser University in the School of Communication. And so we call it DDI as an acronym. So the director of the DDI is Dr. Wendy Hee-Kyung-Chun, and she brought a group of researchers from around the world that will work across disciplines, humanities, social sciences, computer and data sciences, to really foster a democratic and dialogical process. And especially we're working with a lot of scholars, not only within the Faculty of Communication, Health Sciences, Applied Sciences. We also have a lot of external affiliates from 24 organizations from US, UK, Europe, and Asia. So it's a very diverse environment, and some of the research streams that we have, there is quite a number of them that are ongoing. There are about 11 streams, and the first one that you see, Bridge Research Consortium, is one of the most recent one that's been added to the Institute, and which I will be talking about as the second part of today's talk. And so let's start with some framing exercises. So I wanted to ask you a few questions. So think about these questions. Who do you think gets to be visible in a lot of the socio-technical systems? So when I say socio-technical systems, anything from emails, smartphone, apps, Messenger, Spotify, anything that we on a daily basis work with, and whose labor, knowledge, or concerns remain invisible, and why? Think about it for a little bit. And where is the human labor behind a lot of the emerging technologies, such as AI? So that's the big question that we're going to go into. So as I said, list all the humans, job categories who must do work for an AI system. Besides the ones that are exemplified here, does anybody want to share what kind of work, human labor, gets invisible? Yes. Yeah. So actual builders of the infrastructure. Yes, absolutely. Anybody else? Yes.
Basically, everyone's besides a few which are on the top.
Absolutely, yeah. Only the few CEOs like Jeff Bezos or Sam Altman, all these big CEOs who get the large checks when, yeah, there's also a lot of inequality, the aspect of inequality that we want to talk about. One more, maybe? Yes.
Content moderation.
Content moderation, yes, absolutely. For instance, like data labelers, data entry workers. Is anybody familiar with Amazon's Turk, Mechanical Turk? Yes. Those folks definitely are all in this category, right? So we're going to time travel a little bit and then try to make some human labor that was incredibly important to build the modern day media, new technologies visible. So has anybody heard of Keypunch operation before? Or Juliana, how do you say that in German? Lochkarten. Has anybody seen it or? Yes, okay. What is it?
It's a different medium to store data.
Yes, it's a medium to type in data, right? Anybody else? Yeah.
Like the punch cards?
Yes, exactly. So this is what Keypunch device looks like. So precisely, you're putting that stiff paper card in that location, and the Keypunch operator would type in keys, mostly numbers, and you will get holes in these punch cards. And usually Keypunch operators, there are two people who work as a tandem. So one on the right is the Keypunch operator who did the initial data entry, and then the second one on the left is the verifier. So she would verify, making sure that there's no errors. To ensure accuracy, they always work in a tandem. So if you imagine, this is like 1950s, 70s. If in the contemporary modern world, we think that data scientists were some of the most popular jobs, right? So Keypunch operators were highly sought after jobs. Ads were everywhere in the newspapers. But we're going to talk about Keypunch operation in a slightly different context in terms of intersections of class, race, as well as gender here. So imagine this large, noisy room in a basement of a bank or insurance company headquarters where a lot of these women hunched over electronic data entry machines and work at desks arranged in neat rows. As you can see, they type as quickly and precisely as possible. That's their whole goal, because there's a lot of data to put in. For instance, in 1950s, 70s, the company's businesses become institutionalized, and there are so many documents to datify. For instance, invoices, credit card transactions, memos, documents. There are so many things. So there was a high demand in these Keypunch operation. So to track the quality of these women work, managers simply count the number of accurate cards. It was oftentimes highly surveilled, and what is not really discussed in the larger scholarship is that Keypunch operation, even though it really anchored computation during this time period, all over, not only in North America but also in Europe, it never really it never was really talked about. So what we're going to think about is who are some invisible technical labor, visible actors who gets to be invisible, and invisibilized actors whose erasure benefits the system or the company. Yes?
What do you mean it's never been talked about?
So within the feminist science, technology, and studies, media studies, as well as labor sociology, there were many scholars that examined a lot of the recurring themes of inequality, as well as sort of exploitation of workers, especially people of color. And when it came to women, it became even more so. So, for instance, labor sociologist Karen Hosfeld went into the field of Silicon Valley in the 1970s and interviewed so many women and how they were framed as sort of the most suitable workers because of their nature of having smaller hands, for instance. Media scholar Lisa Nakamura talks about specifically nimble fingers, nimble meaning very, like you can move around fast and dexterous, right? So in 1960s, she went to Navajo region in New Mexico, and there was a semiconductor company called Fairchild, and they specifically promoted Navajo women to be most suitable for these low-cost, kind of exploitative circuit chip-making jobs because they frame them as, you know, they're culturally very they're cultural laborers, culturally creative laborers because they do a lot of textile. So what I'm saying is that there are a lot of large scholarship that talks about the critical role of these labor of women of color who really pinned the institutionalization and infrastructure of a lot of the computing businesses that we talk about. There's a circuit chip, microchip, semiconductor industry, and also Ai Hua-ong, which is based in San Francisco, somewhere in California, I'm not sure, San Francisco. But she also did a rich ethnographic study in Malaysia during the 1980s and 90s. And that was a time when Asia was also going through a lot of capitalist changes. It was a site where a lot of the outsourcing of the tech labors were happening. So she examined how a lot of the Malay women in the very patriarchal and a different cultural context than any other regions in North America, for instance, or Europe. She examined how these women negotiated and a lot of the contested realities within the workplace where they were facing a lot of exploitation, but at the same time they needed a job. So they were trying to feed their family, support their family as best as they can. So all these scholars really looked at how a lot of these women workers were very important in this history. However, their voices were never really recollected nor elevated. So that is one of the reasons why within this context of global migration, immigration, as well as capitalist industrialization, my PI, Dr. Wendy Hee-Kyung-Chan, and I wanted to highlight the struggles and kind of resistance that a lot of these women workers were experiencing. So, and this is what I meant by the untold and forgotten stories of these women workers in the early computing history. As I asked you earlier, you know, when I asked you a question, how many of you have heard of Keypunch operation? And not many. So that already means that there is something that we are not aware of at all. And one thing that I want to emphasize is that a lot of the official documents that you read, for instance, books, history, archival materials, these are considered official, right? But who wrote them? What is written about? Whose voices were included? There is a significant gap between what is contextualized in these official documents and what was really happening in the reality of a lot of these human labor. So that's the key of this project that I wanted to talk about, where we are using archival and oral history as well as interviews to really elevate these voices and women workers' experiences in the 1970s in Canada. So One of the aims was to examine the ethnic formation of Korean Canadian immigrant women working as Keypunch operators from the 1970s to 1990s. And drawing on historical and archival research and 10 interviews with these women who are now in their 70s and 80s, we wanted to do this project as fast as we could because a lot of these women are passing away, right? And some of the women that we were able to recruit weren't able to also be interviewed because they weren't coherently able to speak with us. So in a way, like, it was a very emotional journey for the past 2 years, and it recently came to a conclusion, to a finish by writing a journal article on this. And so some of the questions that we're asking here is, why were so many women workers' voices and stories untold? How does this impact the current understanding of technology in society? And if you think about it, the Amazon Turk people, or a lot of the gig workers working in the ride-hailing or platform businesses like Uber, food delivery, a lot of these workers' experiences, stories are never really highlighted at all, when there are many issues we know, many issues that need to be addressed in terms of algorithmic unfairness, as well as the unequal power relations when you go into a lot of these apps to work. So finally, how can feminist STS as a scholarship then help redress these omissions and foreground their significance to both Asian American studies and feminist STS studies? So in the history of early computing, Keypunch operation was described often as something that was not sought after. Even though there were a lot of jobs available, the turnout rate was always low because a lot of people could not overcome this highly surveilled, some people even called it pink collar clerical ghetto job. Is everyone familiar with what pink collar means? So there's a white collar job, blue collar job, and pink collar job. So white collar is the kind of office work that we do, a lot of the businessmen. Blue collar is the more physically demanding, kind of like the factory work, as well as trade jobs. And then pink collar are the jobs that are taken by women. So here, some people called Keypunch operation as a pink collar, only women, clerical, office-related, ghetto job. So it sounds pretty bad. And also some others called it mind-numbing, soul-destroying, because you are trying to type as fast as you can, but also accurately. So you're under constant pressure in this highly stressful environment. But at the same time, when we interviewed a lot of these women, they somehow found this very odd enjoyment in this work. They really loved sort of being numb from everyday reality as an immigrant woman who just came to a new land, who couldn't speak the language very well, who couldn't really assimilate themselves to new culture. So we want to understand why there was such a gap between the history and the reality. So for instance, in order to recruit a lot of these women, we went to ethnic Korean Canadian churches, literally just asking people, oh, do your grandparents or did your grandma ever work as a Keypunch operator? Or if you know anybody who worked as a Keypunch operator, let us know, that type of thing. And then we met with a group of women Keypunch operators in a restaurant, in a setting that is more comfortable for them to just like sit down and just have a girl talk. A lot of these women, they all worked together for 20, 30 years as they started Keypunch operation. So there were also a lot of sensitivities that, as a researcher, we had to keep in mind that a lot of these women also have to go back to their memory lane, right? And a lot of the thoughts or opinions that they're saying now, 30 years later, may not always be true. But at the same time, we still need to honor their voices and stories. So that was something that we had to keep in mind as we work on this project. And based on the interviews, we also got clues as to where we need to go next for more information. Some of these women explained to us that they took ESL classes, English as Second Language classes, in local colleges in Ontario region. So we went to the local college archive and went through hundreds of documents about, Keypunch operation ads, what kind of traits that they were looking at when they were trying to hire a lot of these women workers, especially immigrant women workers. I also used microfilm for the very first time. So microfilms were containing a lot of newspaper contents from the 60s and 70s. So all of this process led us to 4 key points that I can share with you, and then I will wrap it up to go into the next segment. We were able to uncover that a lot of these Keypunch operation jobs offered a form of independence and community for a lot of these women workers who weren't able to rapidly assimilate to the new culture. And it was a temporary respite from the pressures to speak English and also from childcare, being a good wife in a family household. And this odd dynamic illustrates how their home life began to take on workplace-like qualities because after work they still needed to go home, feed their babies, make lunch, dinner. A lot of household chores are still left, right? And while their work life shifted to resemble something that is comforting and mind-numbing. We further argue that Keypunch operation anticipates contemporary forms of workplace gamification, a system in which surveillance, performance, metrics, productivity, tracking are reframed into a system of rewards. Because a lot of these Keypunch operators, if they could get things as accurate as possible, as fast as possible, they often got rewarded in terms of bonuses and a little bit more holidays than other people. So there was a constant competition within this environment, which is also something that we're very used to hearing about in Silicon Valley. So all in all, these methods really allowed us to visible, invisible, and in terms of power. And although very different, these two distinct methods, archival history and oral history, they interacted and complemented each other to create a richer, more democratic understanding of technology and society. Any questions so far? Yes?
You started the presentation with the untold truth about labor we see now in AI, and yet pivoted to this. Does it have to do with that?
We will now move into that very segment about the AI. Well, actually, the AI will come in the third segment, but we're getting into the second one, which is the part where we're trying to make different perspectives visible. So, I wanted to get into Mentimeter here under. Oh, man, I don't have Wi-Fi. Because it's a cinema. Oh.
There should be anywhere.
But I can't use EduRoam. I only use the Graz guest.
No, and that's not working.
No. Okay, I'll just ask you a question. So, in.
Do you want my mobile hotspot or you just want to?
Let me see if I can hotspot it for 2 people. For those who have said mix, raise your hands. Okay, can you kind of say like which mix from here?
Mix of social media, obviously.
Uh-huh.
And the sites use
Okay. So online.
Yeah, online sites,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes podcasts.
Sometimes podcasts. Okay, that's a good mix. Okay. How about you?
For me, it's more like a mix between social media, newspaper, radio, news,
Uh-huh.
and as well the friends and family.
Friends and family, human. Okay. Who else? Next. Yes?
I would say old school newspaper, but also background TV and radio news. But I would also I avoid the news from the
Yes.
as much as possible.
Yes. An old newspaper, like paper newspaper, right?
Yes.
Do you pay for it? Wow, okay. Admirable. Next, who else? Who also said mix? Yes.
I mean, I'm also like using social media, but
Uh-huh.
also newspaper because my parents and my grandparents
Uh-huh.
pay for it. Yeah.
Which social media would you say you gain the most?
Like I only have Instagram, basically like movies. Like I don't have these Facebook or TikTok. So.
Uh-huh. Excellent. Oh, what about you on the yes?
I would say pretty much everything that's listed up there except podcasts.
Except podcast. Okay. I want to hear from folks over here. Yes.
I like using certain newspaper apps, like the New York Times app, and going through articles there, together with podcasts, and also just like watching the news on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Talking
Mm-hmm.
to friends and family, I'd say that's my mix.
Great. Great. What about yes? When
I would say
yeah.
also social media.
Mhm.
Also, my parents have newspapers and background TV, radio, because when I'm home, there's always the radio going on. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yes.
I would say mostly TikTok because it was something that I used when I was back home. But when I moved to Austria, I found the only way I can keep up what's happening back home is through TikTok. So now I would say mostly it's going to.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that's because of the content?
I think I would say mostly because my country that's how they keep up.
Like censor. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I actually mix all of these a bit.
Oh wow. Okay.
But most of the information I get from Instagram and from reading the news online.
Mm-hmm. Would you say Instagram gives you a good content feed in terms of news?
I'd say I get the better mix if I read the news online.
Mm-hmm.
Via Instagram, it's mostly about the same topics. So if I want to know about other topics, it's better to read the newspaper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I do like my newsfeed in Instagram quite a lot. I have several newspapers that I'm following, and like from different countries, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a more diverse picture than just watching or listening to the news from the country.
Like which accounts do you follow?
Guardian,
Guardian.
Times,
Uh-huh.
and Tagesschau. So that's like a it's
Yeah.
not that
Yeah.
much,
In
but
Germany.
yeah, I think it's a bit more diverse there. Puts the news kind of into perspective a little.
Excellent. Wow, we've got a very diverse group here. Yes.
But if you interact with a post on social media platform and then follow the link to the platform of the medium itself, for example, the newspaper, does that mean that you get news from the social media platform or from the existing publisher?
Well, it depends on how you want to interpret it, right? You first started off from social media platform, so the origin will be social media, but at the same time, if you go click on the link and then you go to the website, and then from there you again expand yourself, then that's a different source again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like if you only interact with the media on Instagram, it's very superficial because there's not a lot of information that can be expressed in one post. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I feel like it and it's still curated by the legacy media. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I then agree that we get the media from social media.
Yeah.
But that's my opinion.
Yeah. Excellent. Do you guys all remember this very historical moment called COVID-19 pandemic? That's only 3 years ago, if you think about it. It's crazy, right? The reason why I'm saying this is because in terms of public health, the number one source apparently during the COVID-19 pandemic people went for was media. And this is in the context of Canada. I need to emphasize this. And when the next pandemic happens, I mean, there's no guarantee that it will not happen because we already went through one. We need to be prepared, right? COVID-19 was our first trial run, and but then how do we do this? How can we study and combat the impact of social media in terms of vaccine hesitancy? So this is the second project that I want to talk about in terms of these microspaces that are curated by the black box algorithms set by a lot of these big media companies like Meta, Instagram, TikTok, and whatnot. So in order to tackle this, we know that it is very, very, very difficult to do this because it's become even more difficult recently because a lot of the social media companies don't easily share their data at all. And everyone gets an individualized feed, obviously, their own newspaper, their own news channels, their own news content. And yet a recent survey of Canadians shows that we think we get the majority of the news from Facebook. And at the same time, researcher access to Facebook's data or Twitter's data has been largely shut down in the recent years. But also, even if we could track everything, it's hard to know what matters to the spread of vaccine hesitancy. So then this particular study that I'm part of within the DDI, where we work with a lot of tech people as well as social scientists and humanities people, we have designed these 3 levels of questions. One is a way to understand these personalized feeds on social media. And second, we're trying to get a global picture of social media trends, if there is one as global, right? And then thirdly, we are doing some case studies of past events in terms of going through AstraZeneca case study during the 2021 in Canada. So basically, why and how anti-vax materials are fed to certain users, and for others, they're not shown, and how trust is built online when you're engaging with a lot of these content. So one approach that I'm part of is called research persona method. Do we have any UX or UI designers here? Okay. Has anybody heard of research persona method? Okay, cool. So it's my opportunity to share something new with you. Research persona method is basically we craft very careful biographies of fictitious users in order to track the spread of information on sites such as Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. In the UX and UI industry, a lot of qual researchers as well as quant researchers do research persona method in order to increase the benefits and profits of the companies. But within our discipline, we're using this method in order to understand how these micro spaces that are algorithmically curated operate. And as all of you know, on social media nowadays, you find yourself in an algorithmically curated feed based on the topics or people you follow or people you like, the communities that you join. And so here are the 4 fictitious characters that we have carefully crafted. First up is a teacher in public high school. Second is immigrant tech developer in Canada. Third is a health practitioner, ER nurse. And 4th, biotech communications consultant. So I'm going to share one example over here. With these profiles, we like and follow content on social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. But we only participate in a passive role because if you think about ethical side of research, we do not want to trigger or trick any other human being. So we don't ever want to participate in an active role. What this method allows us is to better understand these opaque recommender systems and see the larger narratives around vaccine acceptance or vaccine hesitancy. So we can also look for and understand the algorithmically curated communities that develop around these typical users. So, for example, this is the content that the research persona Amelia, who is 33 years old, communications professional in biotech space, third generation Japanese Canadian, interested in women empowerment, leadership and work-life balance, and etc. I wonder if you can read. So we basically record all of our field work when we go into the social media platforms and look through what kind of content that gets fed. So first, right now you're seeing she's looking at the Science magazine, reading through the comments. She's currently seeing discourse about the National Science Foundation in the US and reading through the comments. And the next video, and here's sort of the content that shows up 2 weeks later after we launched Amelia. Let me warn you that the content is a little bit disturbing, mostly having to do with baby birth, baby vaccine. Oops. Oh, sorry. Okay, I guess we're experiencing a little bit of technical difficulty. So as you can see here, all of a sudden within 2 weeks, Amelia started getting very disturbing childbirth or baby vaccinated, a lot of these content. And also she started getting a lot of polarized debates on social distancing and the ban of social gatherings during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I mean, the fact that she's a woman at a childbearing age and she's out on the dating scene, these could be potential factors. But by this point, we started to find this content too upsetting. So to respect for our researchers' health, we terminated this profile shortly afterwards. And yes.
So for better understanding, you set up a user and then interacted with the social media website like the user with the background information would.
Exactly. So the researcher would be Amelia, and Amelia goes into social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook, and the researcher imitates what Amelia would do. And in terms of biography here, I only put in like 4 bullet points, but it's like a 4-page document of what her hobbies may be, what her secrets in life may be, what kind of conflict she may have psychologically, so that all of these things can be sort of clues that we can use in the social media platforms. So all of this is recorded through our own DDI developed phone app, and this is the part that I'm not an expert of because I'm a qual researcher. This is something that our tech team does. And our team is currently in the process of making this open source. So what we have learned through the recordings on our phone app is that users are not gathering a certain type of content because they're actively seeking it or searching for it, but based on the basis of how long you spend on a particular type of video or content. So this is different from what a lot of the social media companies argue for, right? For example, if you spend 5 seconds on a cute animal video, it might send you down another cute animal rabbit hole on TikTok. And we can also document how long you need to stare at a conspiracy-based video to get thrown into another conspiracy TikTok. So here you can see it lets you record and upload a phone session. And this is a tool that they're also developing in order to understand what kind of affects that you might develop when you interact with your own feed. So in a way, it builds up a catalog of the influence across different topics over time, and this helps us understand why we get fed certain stories and certain content. So this allows us to test the bias of various topics in the recommendation algorithm, but and also because it might be that not even Meta or TikTok are aware of every harmful rabbit hole that exists on their platform. So if you upload a recording of each session, you can build up your own archive over time. So the ideal is that anyone, no matter what they do or who they are, can get a better sense of their personalized feed on these social media platforms and be more aware of their online ecosystem and consumption over time. And also another thing that we're working on is to linking a lot of the content that we see to back-end traffic, meaning basically tracking what information gets sent back and forth from you and the platform. So this is a multi-year ongoing research that started in 2025, will be going on until early 2027. So obviously we're not at a stage where we can share with you like the concrete findings. And we're also awaiting to do one more round of fieldwork with 2 more personae. But what you can see is that the research persona method is a bottom-up sampling approach to study a key dimension of the information environment that we're in. So far, the preliminary finding shows that gender certainly seems to be a crucial factor, determinant in what kinds of information get delivered to us. So to link back to the first Keypunch operation project that I talked about, just as labor can be invisible in the historical research, so can user perspectives and experiences that we have on a daily basis on these social media platforms. And methods and approaches attempt to make them visible. And this is an ongoing research trying to understand that very connection, how certain community members are fed certain information, like the echo chamber that we talked about last week with Dr. Dwelva, as well as how certain users build trust online in relation to vaccine hesitancy. If you don't have any other questions, I would like to move on to the final part of the project, which gives me 30 minutes. Okay. So this is my individual project that I'm pursuing within my doctoral research, and what I'm examining is AI textbook in the context of South Korea, which is often touted as a true classroom revolution. And I must say I've been always very passionate and committed to education or improving education. Some of the key philosophers that I always go back to are John Dewey and Paulo Freire. And just like John Dewey here says, I believe that education is not only preparation for life, but it's life itself. I believe that there are intrinsic values to education that fulfills humans in no other ways. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're all here, right? We're the evidence. We're still continuing to learn and study. So I'm going to go back to Mentimeter to ask you one more question. Okay, so my question here is, what are some common narratives or keywords, even keywords, do you hear about when someone says educational technology? What does it mean when you say educational technology? And what kinds of narratives do you hear? coming up. Just going to give another 10 seconds. Okay. Shall I open it? Okay. Let's see. Simpler for the teacher, availability, study GPT. Oh, okay, I'm curious about that one. Moodle, scalable, individualized, better understanding, surveillance, efficiency, computers, individualization, personalization tools like iPads in class, online Nachhilfe, okay, learnification, yes, learn at your own speed, online learning platform tailored to students' need, virtual classroom. Who can somebody tell me who wrote tailored to students' need? Yeah, do you want to elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially if you have like these new methodologies, you can really deep dive into specific issues where students don't feel really comfortable. I'm thinking of math, for example, if you're beginner, you don't know how to divide, for example, multiplication, you can focus on this specifically, and you don't need a teacher all the time there to do this in front of class for everyone, but you can tailor it to each student.
So for a specific subject or for specific learning type, it can be helpful, yes. Learn at your own speed, who wrote that? Yes. Do you want to say a little bit about it?
It's very similar to tailor to students' needs. Some people learn faster than others, and then if you tailor it according to their needs or their level, students can benefit.
Yeah. And that's the kind of general narrative that you hear.
Yeah, speed, it kind of implies that there's one direction you need to go. And that's also part of the quantification of educational technology, that it's all expressed in numbers, and then number go up means you learn faster.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Who wrote the study GPT? Yes, I don't know what study GPT is, so can you elaborate a little bit?
Sure, it's like ChatGPT,
Uh-huh.
but for the students of the University of Graz.
Oh. So is it only available for students in Graz? Oh, and it's a university developed software? No, yes?
No, they run GPT on university servers.
Ah.
But it's created by the ideal lab of the university.
Yeah, they sit in it.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. That kind of connects to the whole idea of, I guess, tech sovereignty in a way. I don't know. Okay, interesting. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts here. So I think we can kind of agree on the kinds of narratives that we often hear about educational technology. I think these 5 sum up the key stories that we always hear about, how it will personalize our curricula and thus it's good for you. It widens access, it reduces educational gap and also reduces a lot of the teacher's workload. It fosters creativity and innovation like none other learning means, and it will achieve classroom revolution. And this is exactly what, in the case of South Korea, when the South Korean government decided to develop what is touted as the world's first AI textbook pushed for this kind of narrative. So my current research is an extension of this study. It's called The Datafied School in the Neoliberal Era, Pandemic Shifts in South Korean Educational Policy. So in this study, what I did is that I first examined at discursive level how a lot of the imaginaries or the kinds of futures that a lot of the policymakers think about in terms of the future of education, the direction of education, how they get articulated on the policy documents. So here when I wrote this paper, I was actually in London in the UK during the national lockdown, so I was very emotionally involved as well because I was a student myself then. So what I noticed from looking at the Digital Education Action Plan, the European Commission's the larger educational policy document, as well as South Korean education policy documents that came during the time period of 2020 to 2023, what I see is that this increasing erosion of this intrinsic meaning that Paulo Freire or John Dewey talked about earlier, the value of public good, public education, within the sort of neoliberal influence that a lot of the tech companies in Silicon Valley bring in, and how that also combines with a lot of the state government's agenda to push for producing more sort of AI talents rather than really providing a meaningful education for each student. And just like many other critical edtech scholars, including Juliana here, I share my concerns that a new theory of education is consistently being pushed by the private corporate sector, driven by this techno-utopianism, which generates an important gap between these perfect imaginaries, how the tech will revolutionize the classroom, it'll make your study and learning even more efficient than ever, more effective than ever, than actualities. So if any of you are curious about this policy analysis, you can scan the QR code later. So after examining this time period of 2020 to 2023 at discursive level, I wanted to level up and go into the field then and understand the realities of classroom, how the teaching and learning is done with all these new technologies being adopted, and oftentimes not in consentful or careful ways, just like a lot of the platforms that we use in a commercial sense. So the best way to do this for me was to take an ethnographic approach. Is everyone familiar with ethnography as an approach? Okay, what is an ethnography? Yes.
Researcher goes into a field and in that context tries to understand the way people behave or act or go about their daily life.
Yeah, excellent, yes. Thank you. Did you want to add something?
To understand the culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, culture. Certain types of practices, why they're being done that way, how they're being done. Yeah? Anyone else? Those are excellent answers that I don't need to add any more. But so to sum up, it's a qualitative method for collecting data, examining cultures, customs, practices, to draw a conclusion about how societies and individuals function and operate. So, for an example, an ethnographer may closely study a group of food delivery drivers for 5 months to understand and describe the social customs of that group and how they adapt to the algorithmic technologies. So that's an ethnographic approach. Yeah, and the ethnographer may explain to the group they're interested in understanding better about the ride-hailing or food delivery sector as a new platformized gig work, and want to know what it's like to be part of that social group. So you go in as a participant. Sometimes you observe what they do, how they do certain things. The primary purpose is to gain a holistic understanding of a phenomenon of your inquiry. So it gives you depth, context, insight, and it informs your research by shaping your questions, guiding iterative data collection, revealing complexities, and producing more grounded, nuanced interpretations. So, as an extension of the empirical study that I showed you earlier, the key questions that troubled me were, then which direction is current education going? For the better or worse when combined by this very technocentric, almost techno-nationalist framing around education? Is it going in a direction that some of the key educational philosophers like John Dewey or Paul Freire argued for? So in 2023, the South Korean government announced an ambitious multi-year initiative of giving one AI textbook to one student across all K-12. And what they promised was that this will revolutionize the classroom learning and teaching. This was a part of the larger multi-billion-dollar initiative as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So as you can imagine, when there's a crisis all over the world, people get confused, and within that very hectic moment, a lot of the policies can get pushed ahead without much consent or having the sufficient dialogical space. But most importantly, a lot of the policymakers' aim was to tie this initiative to the larger state's modernization agenda, which is to produce AI talents for the national economic competitiveness. And this is the kind of, oh, by the way, that's the picture of the AI textbook. A kid is using an iPad looking like a device, and the device is embedded with all these algorithmic technologies ranging from student surveillance, data valence to predictive analytics. And we later have found out that a lot of these technologies actually breached student privacy, and I'll get into more detail in a second. But if you also look around the world, we're seeing the similar patterns. The United States and China, United Arab Emirates have all mandated AI learning in K-12 this year. And Estonia, a small Baltic digital frontrunner in Europe, also joined the movement. But most importantly, South Korea was actually the first to push this nationally orchestrated big political agenda to public education. So that has, I believe that sets a very key example to a lot of these countries as well, and we can learn from the kinds of failures and successes this initiative is witnessing right now.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have private education in South Korea as well?
Yes, and that's actually a huge problem in education, because education has always been imagined as a steering force for the national sort of competitiveness. And also because South Korea, there's North Korea and South, it's a divided country, right? And then we have a history of 70 years being divided, and we're still in the war. We're just not having the war right now. So historically speaking, a lot of South Koreans have this mentality that we always have to protect ourselves from the outer forces. And one of the best ways to do that is to provide STEM education, so science, tech, engineering, and math. Within this context, private education was something that started booming from 1980s. And to this day, there's one mecca of private education, which is also featured by the country's one of the most expensive private properties. So there's a huge inequality when it comes to a lot of students who want to have better public education, but as you can imagine, if those students whose family can send the kids to additional private schooling and also how to better take certain tests better, then they get ahead of the others. So, and also the funny thing is, I wonder if anybody has seen, is anybody familiar with German YouTube channel called Kurzgesagt? Yeah. So Kurzgesagt actually had a very funny documentary on South Korea that South Korean future is basically doomed because we record one of the lowest of lowest birth rates across all countries in the world. And that actually stems from a lot of that hyper-competitive nature of education. And also a lot of the younger generations right now are struggling to get jobs or get better jobs for their perspective, compared to their parents' generation. So it's a massive issue if you look at the broader picture. So that's an excellent question. And one of the reasons why the state government pushed for this kind of initiative and saying that tech and this AI textbook can solve the digital divide or educational divide in this sense, and also reduce the expensive cost of private education expenditure. They literally promise that the AI textbook will solve that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So I assume that there's also then a big disparity between the rollout of educational technology between the public and private education. Or is it?
That's a very interesting question that I will also get into. But to answer your question briefly, this AI textbook case was a huge multi-billion-dollar, multi-year initiative working with this PPP, public-private partnership project, and it was so massive that the whole education technology industry transformed when this initiative came out. So almost existing textbook publishers quickly transformed themselves as we're the next up-and-coming edtech companies because they wanted to profit from this trickle-down effect because the government poured so much money into it. And but because it was a PPP, there was still a strict guideline when it comes to how this AI textbook would need to look like or how it need to be designed. So in a sense, when a lot of the educational technology devices that are being developed or solely produced from the for-profit sector, let's say in Silicon Valley or the startup companies, it's different in that sense because there was also a huge power involvement from the state government. Okay, cool. I love these questions, by the way. So engaging. So the big picture we see is that this larger AI arms race and all these countries trying to secure their AI supremacy trickles down to all domains of policies, including education. And the commonality that we see is this state-based, state-centrally orchestrated initiative reflecting broader national AI strategies. So while there are all these promises made about how technologies will democratize education, closing the gap between the digital educational divide and improve the overall public education system through algorithmic technologies, my research asks the following questions. So to what extent does this tech solutionist educational reform policy fulfill its promises on the ground? And how did this national initiative pan out in the realities of classrooms? How does the public then conceptualize what counts as good education in the AI era, right? So draw on philosophers of education like John Dewey and Paulo Freire that I talked about, and also anticipation study. I try to understand the changing behaviors and pedagogical educational practices of teachers, parents, policymakers, institutions at large. So there are layers to this approach. First, I look at the larger public discourses, news reports, policy memos, documents, promotional policy materials, and how a lot of these imaginaries of policymakers are being articulated at discursive level. Then I did a comparative field work, one in that private education mecca in Seoul, and one in a more rural area where a lot of the classrooms were getting different types of infrastructure as well as services in terms of AI textbook. Then I started interviewing teachers, parents, edtech developers, and representatives within these companies. And I also observed a lot of forums, info sessions by the state government in terms of rollout of these AI textbooks. And lastly, the kinds of content that I cannot access very well, I decided to do a social media ethnography, primarily what is called as mom cafes. This is like an online platform where a lot of moms from each region will get together and talk about from child rearing tips to national politics. So a lot of opinions are exchanged there. So by doing this, I get to understand exactly how things are being panned out in this case study. Okay, I've got 10 minutes or 7 minutes. What I can share with you today is that because it's an ongoing research, I don't have the full analysis and findings yet, but what I can say is that it's unfortunate that what was dubbed as the world's first AI textbook or the classroom revolution is failing in a fantastic fashion because of this government's hasty push to make this AI textbook initiative happen within just 1.5 years. I mean, to produce an AI textbook itself, it would take many years, especially if you think a lot about how AI as a software, in terms of data collection of all these students and teacher data, it requires a lot more careful design and time, but that wasn't there in this case study. So the first thing that I want to touch upon is that because this AI textbook initiative began as a political project rather than anything by the previous administration, it built upon the earlier initiatives like digital textbook or smart education initiatives from the 2000s and 2010s. It aimed to ride the whole generative AI hype that we had around ChatGPT. And they framed it as the world's first AI textbook, which ultimately turned out to be just a little more than a leveled digital workbook with a bunch of questions to ask for the students. So it was far from revolutionary and on the ground, and I can discuss this more in detail if we have more time. Secondly, there was a lot of pushback from parents and teachers, which was a very positive thing that I witnessed. There was great concern about increasing screen time. I mean, a lot of these parents already have enough fights with their children over screen time because stop using the computer anymore, stop playing the game, you know? So many parents and educators expressed skepticism about adding yet another device on kids' lives. And the parents have enough these parent petition against AI textbook initiative gathered 56,505 signatures, sparking the widespread resistance, which ended up leading to a recent amendment to South Korea's elementary and secondary education law, which explicitly limits textbooks to physical books and ebooks. So no AI textbooks, excluding software like AI, because they think the AI does something more than just a physical book. Yes.
But didn't you say that the textbooks does wear a lot more than digital textbooks, like ebooks? So you said that they didn't really use any AI in this digital textbook because of short time frame. So
No.
is this role relevant?
Good question. So what I meant to say is that because it's a limited time frame, I can't explain to you all the details. So what I wanted to say before was that it is indeed AI-powered device. So there are algorithmic technologies. But what a lot of the teachers and parents initially expected was at the level of ChatGPT, for instance, or the kind of commercial platforms that you see like Claude and Gemini and all the stuff. But because it was very hastily put together, and the advertisement around AI textbook was like revolutionary, and it's going to transform your teaching experience. No, because the teachers found so many malfunctions within the system in the beginning, and even to get started to use the AI textbook, it took about 2 to 3 months for some teachers to actually do this process, because there were also a lot of bureaucracies they had to go through. For instance, they had to get a consent from their parents. Each student had to get a signature from their parents, and that already also took a lot of time. And then once they did, a lot of these young students, for instance, let's say first grader, second grader, they're only learning like Korean alphabets here, and try to log in using English alphabets, Korean password. That's a huge task for the teacher. And even to get through all of this was a chaos. So a lot of teachers also said that, this idea that AI could revolutionize all the learning at a universal level is completely wrong, because, for instance, as I think one of you said, that for a specific subject or for a specific matter, AI could be very helpful, right? But this was a universal solution to all K through 12 from age 8 to 18. So imagine 8 years old, what can they do? They probably do better by playing out in the field, in the playground, rather than trying to type in your English alphabet ID and password. So there were a lot of, realistically speaking, huge gap between what policymakers promised and what teachers and students had to go through. Yes?
Do you think even if they had delivered on that promise, it would have been accepted, or would there still have been a lot of pushback from parents?
Excellent question, yeah. So I think there was, within the process of pushing this initiative from the state government, there was a lot of pushback because, first of all, there was not enough dialogical or sort of democratic space for teachers and students and parents to share their concern. They really had a lot of concerns over screen time, and especially for younger generations, it's a critical cognitive development period, right? A lot of these voices of moms were not taken. And those kind of discussions went over for about 5 to 6 months, that ended up building to more distrust against the government. And the government also failed to address a lot of the questions in terms of privacy and data collection within the preliminary governmental hearings. And those were reported in the news, and that's why there was a lot of distrust against the government has led to a lot of this pushback. But I do believe that there were a lot of parents and the teachers who came to me and told me that if only the approach of the state government was different, right? For the really considering putting the primary needs of the students and teachers and the local needs, for instance. If that was done, and also if the device came out to be something that they really expected it to be, then, and in a safe manner, then they would have really welcomed it. It's that leveled expectations and contestation that led to this fantastic failure of the initiative. So I believe we have 1 minute left. So, so in terms of to conclude, basically, what I wanted to say is, again, it's the trust that was really needed within this process in order to make any initiative successful or possible. There has to be a lot of dialogical, democratic spaces for these discussions, and also as a researcher as well, in order to have access to a lot of these materials, teachers and schools, I had to gain their trust. So I have a lot more to say, but this is the time that we have. So thank you so much for letting me share with you some of the key research that we're doing, and I welcome any questions in the end, or even via email. Here. Okay. Thank you.